Hello and welcome to The Point. We have a special guest this week. Aruna Roy is a well-known social activist. Of course, thank you so much for joining us on Rajya Saba television. Ma'am, my first question to you would be, you've been a very vocal critic of nuclear installations, new nuclear installations in the country. In fact, you're a member of the NAC as well, and you wrote to the NAC chairperson Sonia Gandhi saying that re-evaluation is needed and we should stop commissioning new projects. You also give the example of Japan, France and Germany where public pressure has forced governments to shut them down. Do you think, and my first question is this, do you think we have enough public consensus in the country, in India, to do the same?
See, the trouble is, it goes back to my right to information struggle and the demand for a law. If this is a democracy and if people are the sovereigns in this democracy, and we take informed decisions, then we really need to know much more than we do know now about what the implication of a nuclear plant, whether it's for peaceful purposes or not, will mean for the people in that particular area and for the surrounding areas where there's always possibility of radiation or radioactive substances. Because after Fukushima, the world has again got very sharply aware of the consequences of such installations. So the real struggle with Kudankulam or with Haryana or with Jetapur or any of these other installations now is that people are much more aware. At some point of time, say 30 years ago, people didn't know what was happening. But today people are aware and they are just saying that they have a right to live where they are with the full knowledge that they are not endangering their children and their children's children by genetic defects that are irreversible, and also about precaution, also about technical details. And so a government cannot say that a protest which demands these things is extra-constitutional or sedition or it's treason against the state.
It's interesting you mentioned that. We'll come to sedition in just a bit, but keeping on the re-evaluation bit, is it just the safety, re-evaluating the safety of these projects? Is it the feasibility? Is it the viability? What is it exactly that you have a problem with?
Let me say that the people have a primary concern with safety. That's where I began with, because they are the people who have brought us all into focus now, is the thousands of people in Kudankulam in Tirunelveli district in Tamil Nadu. But the point is that there is a larger debate. When a country and a nation and a government tells you that the best is this, then somebody like me who looks at wind and solar energy as also a non-conventional energy as an alternative will want to know what proportion of our energy resources can be met by non-conventional energy. And if it's a question of costs, who is willing to pay what costs? If the government is worried just about its exchequer, people may measure costs in terms of health, in terms of genital derangement, and maybe actually willing to pay some other costs. So who decides what costs who will pay? And in a democracy, people decide the costs. And you can do it through many ways of finding out how people respond to it. But you can't take arbitrary decisions anymore. Because in a sense, I regard this as a success of India, that there are so many people who are saying so many things.
How does Aruna Roy respond to people who equate opposition to such projects and say this is sedition, this is anti-nationalism? How do you respond to such people?
I think it's immaturity is the best thing I can say about it. And at the worst, I will say that it's completely anti-democratic, it's unequal, and it's in fact unconstitutional to put down dissent, protest as something that has no place in democracy, and I think completely unacceptable. So people who protest should actually, the government should enter into dialogue, and I think dialogue dissipates many of the wrong notions or fears that people may have. But the moment a government or a nation has a knee-jerk reaction and says it's sedition, then the whole question of real sedition then will get brushed under the carpet.
But isn't the question that the nation is not saying it's sedition, it's some people who equate it with sedition? Isn't that a little unfortunate?
The government says it's sedition. So in a sense, it's the voice of the nation. I'm talking about the formal voice of the nation. I'm not talking about the informal voices, of which there are plenty. So I think, therefore, if we don't want to make a mockery of these very serious offences against the state, we should really not indulge in such off-the-cuff, immediate, unthought out reactions to protests. And protests have a place in a democracy. Without protests, there is really no democracy. Just merely casting a vote is not democracy. Even casting a vote honestly is not democracy. Beyond that, there are always these places open where you can raise questions and demand answers.
Going back to Kudangalam right now, you just came back from that place. Do you think the government was too rigid in dealing with the protesters there? And do you think the police used, and yesterday I saw a newspaper headline where protesters were being lathi charged. Do you think the government was a little too harsh on protesters who were just demanding their right to a safe living environment?
See, I think all police action in such cases is too much. I really think that it's a political issue and it should be politically decided. I would have welcomed the senior politicians of Tamil Nadu and some from Government of India going there to sit and dialogue with the people. Because after all, if you want to allay their fears, they will only be allayed by their fears will only be allayed if top level decision makers come to them. And I think if you go by the emails I have received from a batchmate, I used to be once in the IAS. So one of my batchmates stays in Tamil Nadu called Deva Sahayam, who's retired in a very senior post. He now lives in Chennai, and he's written to me saying that even the police, it was one police official whose immediate and random action started the whole process. Even all the police officials were not involved in this. So will the administration take action against that one individual who provoked and then incited a chain of reactions of protest and counter-protest through more or less violence? This woman who's been arrested, Xavier Amma, which I've got information from another friend, came about 3 weeks ago and spoke in the Gandhi Peace Foundation. Completely reasonable woman, a beedi maker. She's been arrested and she's disappeared into the voids of the police. We don't know where she's gone. With her, many others have been arrested. People have been pushed to the edge of the sea. Men have jumped into the sea to swim, but the women have had no recourse. So they've been arrested and they've been beaten and lathi charged. I think somewhere in the whole notion of law and order and the notion of peace, one has to understand how to deal with protest. And I seriously think that if I were in government today, I would train a whole bunch of civil servants and the police in how to deal with protest and how to dialogue.
Does being a member of the NAC, doesn't that give you extra leverage, some sort of leverage that normal activists or other activists might not?
It gives me a marginal leverage that at least I get some people to hear me. But in terms of bringing in systematic systems of dealing with this kind of protest, I think we'll have to go through the regular chain. Right. But I really think the message is loud and clear, because whether it is in Khandwa, where people were standing in neck-deep water, or Kudankulam, we don't know how to deal with these protests. It's not that we want to bring the police and take them to jail and release them. That's not the way to deal with it. In a mature democracy, generally you must enter into a dialogue, and how do you enter into a dialogue is something we all have to learn.
Well, I'd like to speak to you about the recent deadlock in Parliament in the winter session, and so many bills that were pending, but that's after the break. We'll come back after the break. Just a little moment's notice, we'll come back, more a conversation with Aruna Roy after this short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to this special edition of To The Point. We are in conversation with Aruna Roy. Ma'am, the recent session of Parliament, the monsoon session of Parliament, there were 32 bills that were listed. Everyone knows what happened in Parliament this time around. There was absolutely no business being done. No financial bills were passed. All the pending bills remained that, including important bills like that you worked on, the Lokpal, for example, as well. Do you think, my first question on the Parliament deadlock and the logjam is, do you think the opposition, especially the principal opposition party, was too rigid in not letting any business being done and giving the example of the coal scam and other scams as well? But do you think they were too rigid in their position by not letting Parliament function?
See, actually this has happened periodically with whatever opposition party there is, whichever party it may be, stopping proceedings. And I think as an Indian who pays money to finance these parliamentary proceedings, and also my taxes, pay the members of Parliament who claim allowance, I really would say that you can't intervene and interfere with the business of the day. The business must be completed. And if you have objections, it should be voiced. I certainly do think there is a place to voice this, the disagreements and even the anger, and it should come out in real questions, it should come out in demanding real answers. In fact, I would have been very happy if these days had been spent in really getting the miasma of the coal blocks cleared for people like us. We had to have special sessions with members of the press to understand what it really meant. What we would have looked forward to was this being discussed in Parliament, being projected by your various channels like the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha television, tuning into it and understanding what lay behind this completely obtuse and completely miasmic information that is
Debate and
percolated
dialogue
down
instead
to
of disruptions.
That's precisely what I mean. First the facts. Secondly, the discussion and the dialogue, and have an angry debate. It doesn't matter, but it's an angry debate also illuminates the positions, the ideology behind it and the issues that are involved. And most governance actually, even post the right to information, it's now coming out slowly, is incomplete in camera. So people really don't know what it is. And I think it was a waste of time and waste of people's money that Parliament did not function.
I want to talk about the RTI bill and the certain changes that have come into it. But before I go there, staying on Parliament, two important bills were listed in this current session of Parliament which didn't happen. One was the Lokpal, which you and your organisation worked on. The other one was the Whistleblowers Protection Bill, another very important bill in the context of the times we live in. Given the current status or the current draft of the Lokpal bill, for example, or the Whistleblowers bill, would you say that you are happy with the current drafts, or would you say that these drafts are watered down versions of what you would have liked to see come in Parliament?
See, the trouble is that the process of a legislation post the RTI, because in the RTI there was a participatory lawmaking process in which we didn't sit and make the law, we pressed for a law. But Justice P.B. Sawant, who was chairperson of the Press Council of India, drew up the first draft. So thereafter the draft circulated, it went to many states, states made laws, then it came back. So we understand that the law-making process will never be completely satisfactory for any group. Then it goes into the standing committee, and the standing committee we go and depose and testify, and out comes a law, then Parliament has to accept it, and then it becomes law. So no law is ever completely satisfied.
But particularly on the Lokpal and Whistleblowers.
But I am saying, but the Lokpal bill, except for one very serious issue which I think we would really feel unhappy about, that it should apply to the states, lokayuktas as well, and to states, and to cover the states. For the rest of it, it's something which we can improve on, but which should really now see the light of day. It should really see the light of day, because if this Parliament does not put it through, then it's going to have a very negative impact on the coming polls in every way, on the present party or the coalition in power, and we don't know whether there will not be another uprising of people demanding this, because corruption and its issues, no matter whether the original group still stays fighting corruption or not, has been a continuing factor and an issue for years and years and years in this country. Even RTI was born out of a desire to minimize corruption and the arbitrary use of power.
Right.
There are two things of equal concern.
We'll talk about RTI like I promised. We'll also talk about the people's movement you just mentioned. One last question on Parliament though before that. The Whistleblowers Bill. Like I said, very important bill. There is a clause that exempts the NSG, and there are certain exemptions from that clause, and they say that national security and national integrity is the rationale for it. Do you think these exemptions that keeps issues of national integrity or national sovereignty out of the ambit of the bill, do you think that affects the credibility of the bill in any case?
See, it fundamentally weakens the bill, as in right to information as well. Now even the CBI has been brought in under wrap. See, the problem is that it will have to be a long-drawn battle and struggle between conscience-stricken individuals and citizens of this country, and bringing down this extraordinary fear that the system has of transparency. So that debate will continue, and we will need to bring it down. And I know that there are parts of this country with the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in place where there are no rights. So there are very serious issues in this country, and those places will never have any rights at all. So we really do think we need to attack those things. But for a beginning, whatever law is passed should be passed quickly. For those who do get covered by it, at least let them, and we will now seek amendments and we will seek changes. But to not do anything at all now, smacks of complete indifference.
I want to talk about the RTI bill, but that's going to be after the break. One more small little breather. We'll come back with Aruna Roy after this small breather. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching Rajya Saba television. Welcome back. We're still in conversation with Aruna Roy. Ma'am, you worked so hard over the years on the RTI Act. It did come, we had a major victory when the RTI Act actually became law. But the final notification sent by the ministry on July 31st, if I'm not wrong, mandate a 500-word limit for applications and prescribe a long list of documents for appeals, among other stringent conditions as well. Do you think that it sort of dilutes the meaning and the use of RTI and the rationale behind fighting for the RTI? Do you think these new final notifications will affect the RTI bill and the working of the RTI Act in general?
See, there are some issues within those amendments which may be based on experience. For instance, they wanted to limit it to 150 words. It's because of long dialogues and debates and discussions and struggle that it has been raised to 500. Now 500 typed words will be about 3 or 4 sheets of paper. What we did fight for is that the annexures should be entertained. So all the details should be in the annexures, and there are some genuine complaints from public information officers that they are unable to read very lengthy documents and therefore they can't do justice. So the 500 word limit may not be that terrible, but we'll have to see it through. We'll have to work it through, and if it doesn't work, we'll have to come up again with another demand. The problem with these rules is again that there has not been the kind of transparency system that we wanted, that it should have been up on the website. They should have entertained, the final rules should have also entertained some responses, which it didn't. And we are really fighting for pre-legislative processes. So rules which are amended should also go up for that kind of.
Amendment after amendment after amendment kind of defeats the purpose of the RTI.
See, the RTI can never be defeated, and we will fight for it. And these amendments must be stopped when they go against the grain of the RTI. And that there are enough users in this country who will fight it. It's one law which has been owned by lakhs of people. Just in Maharashtra alone, just in the commission, 25,000 users have been registered. 500,000 users have been registered. So if you just take the whole country, we have millions and millions of users, and you find them from villages, from cities, across the board. You have private companies which have used it, you've got members of parliament who have used it, you get professional groups, you get women. So it's a massively used law. So the government should think very carefully before it tampers with this law, because it is going to touch many, many individuals.
Right.
So it's something the government should be wary of, and it should really enter into a debate with the people before it does anything. And if there are genuine problems with the government, of course, and its implementation, we'd be the last persons to stand in the way to disallow the process of amendment. But in the case of dismiss, they are saying that they will not accept incomplete appellate applications, in which we said that they should register the appeal and then ask for papers to be sent. Now this is going to cause a real amount of trouble.
I want to speak about corruption now. In the country. Corruption is the biggest issue in the country right now, and of course you've worked against corruption in various capacities in various organizations. You've also mentioned, Ms. Roy, that a people's movement, in various interviews of course you've given to publications and newspapers and such like, that a people's movement will come in and only that can catalyze change. I want to draw your attention to the most well-known in recent times of what we can call a people's movement, anywhere close to it, what the media calls Team Anna. Now, Team Anna right now stands disbanded. The core team that they have different agendas, had different agendas, are diverging from their thoughts, and there is no coordination between them right now. Some people thought that Team Anna was what the people's movement was all about, but it's sort of disintegrating right now. Explain to us, Ms. Roy, what sort of a people's movement were you talking about?
I think it's very difficult in a diverse and very pluralistic country like India to talk of one people's movement. That's the first fallacy.
You're saying there will be several?
There will be several. It's only that we can all hold hands and laterally sit on a common platform and say that we have common concerns. That's one thing. And secondly, see, there has got to be a certain strong ideological tethering. If you take the whole country, we have millions and millions of users, and you find them from villages, from cities, across the board. You have private companies which have used it, you get professional groups, you get women. So it's a massively used law. to any people's movement. Corruption is an issue. It's a symptom. It's not the disease. The disease is bad governance. The disease is lack of transparency. The disease is lack of accountability. The disease is non-participatory systems of political mobilization, of governance. So it will only be cured if all these various issues are addressed. Fundamentally, we are an unequal society, not only in terms of our rigid social mores, but even in terms of the kind of public spaces we give, in terms of even of the political formations we have. Therefore, if one part of India is less important than the other, or one group of people are less important than the other, if a marching of 100,000 tribals is less important than 20,000 people, middle class people sitting somewhere, then these are all issues we have to address. So the point really is that in an unequal society, you have to state what you stand for to get the largest common denominator down at the bottom to be with you. And without addressing issues of poverty, without addressing issues of injustice, without addressing the kind of politics of discrimination that we have in this country, whether it's from caste or religion or creed or language or gender, we can't have a large based people's movement. So a large based people's movement will consist of many small movements together holding hands, and that will be the large movement, which I don't think India has actually seen in that nature. We are all issue based movements. Some is RTI movement, you have a land movement.
Do you see a true people's movement taking shape in India, and can we sustain it, is the question?
Why not? I think there is nothing such as impossible, and I think slowly perhaps with the way this country is going in its treatment of essential democratic rights, whether it's dissent, whether it's formation of people into groups, whether it's allowing an MF Hussain to come back, or whether it's disallowing the exhibition to be at the Alliance Française, or whether it is today putting cartoonists in jail, it's preparing grounds for large scale holding of hands, where no matter what you represent, when you see that dissent and disagreement or even debates are seen by the state as anti-national, whether it's from beginning with Binayak Sen to now, there's a whole range of things, and I think it will bring us all together on a common platform, asking for basic democratic and constitutional values to remain intact. This is a Pandora's box. The Pandora's box is open in the case of one cartoonist, it will be open in the case of the politician sitting today in the Rajya Saba and the Lok Sabha tomorrow, and in the case of a civil servant who retires day after. So it's not going to leave any of us free from it.
Since you bring the cartoonist issue, before I thank you from all our sides, your thoughts on Asim Trivedi and the treatment that has been meted out to him. Are we seeing another Binayak Sen sort of case in the making?
We are seeing another repeat of Calcutta, if you just recall, the cartoonist in Calcutta who was arrested. See, a cartoon is a method of political expression, and it's my flag. I can see that flag, or I can see that Ashoka pillar as a symbol of the nation, and in my commentary on what the nation has come to, whether I protest by sitting in Delhi or in Rajasthan or in a village or a city against corruption, if I'm an artist, I will do it with my pen and my brush. And why should a protest be legal and legitimate, and a cartoon be illegal and illegitimate? I can't understand it. And that we have produced the world's best political cartoonism. Should they all be put in jail? I really do think it's a very limited way of looking at the health of a very good pluralistic democracy that India is essentially and has always been. It will reduce it to reductio absurdum to the narrowest definition of democracy, and I think that will be it will be a huge tragedy for India.
Ms. Roy, my last question to you on this particular show. The government, the UPA government, the current government has a little more than 2 years left in power. There are varying views on their performances, UPA 2's performance as we call them. They still have 2 years to go. Do you think the government and the Prime Minister and his cabinet colleagues can salvage in these 2 years their past record, can salvage some pride, and can salvage the country from a mess of scams and other issues like that? Do you think the government has the wherewithal to come back and rally in these 2 years?
It depends very much on the political will. So I don't know how much political will they have. But I would really say there are 3 or 4 issues that they really must address. One is that they must address these issues of corruption which has been raised with factual proof. There must be some white paper, there must be some statement, there must be interviews with the press. They must stand and take cognizance of this instead of dismissing it. And even if it is a small part of it that's right and a large part of it that's wrong, or a large part of it that's right and a small part of it that's wrong, they have the obligation to come before the people and say it. The second thing I would think is of critical importance, standing where I am with very poor people in this country, is that the poor people are now with their backs against the wall. They have no guarantees of health, they have no guarantees of education, everything is being privatized. They need answers as to whether the state will perform its basic obligation to give them pensions, to give them health, to give them education, of the way in which Nehru and the burgeoning national independence, Gandhi, everybody promised us. And that is something they will have to do. They can't talk about PPPs and push everything under the carpet, can't speak about 23 rupees and 32 rupees, and they'll have to bring back some semblance of the rightness of things in terms of the obligation to the poor.
I must thank you on that note. Thank you so much for coming on to the point and talking to us, Ms. Roy. That was Aruna Roy, well-known social activist. Of course, transparency is the key, like Ms. Roy just said. Of course, 2 years left for this government. A lot can happen in that period. Thank you so much for joining us on To The Point. Till next time, thank you and goodbye.